You know, one of the biggest differences between you and me is?
That I think it's hot in our office and you think it's fine.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me, but you're right, it is. It is hot, but it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
So we agree that it's hot, you just hate that it's hot.
Yeah.
And in the winter, how do you feel about it being really cold back here?
It's really cold, but sometimes like cold is better because then I just wear my blanket.
All right.
You know.
You take cold over hot. You can't just wear nothing for a video podcast.
That's true.
That'd be a totally different
And
category
it doesn't matter.
of video.
Even if you're wearing nothing, you're still not cooler.
Yeah, well,
really.
I think it'd be pretty cool. The thing, that wasn't what I was going to say. I was going to say just a little inside baseball here for our listeners. Before we started, you unwrapped a cough drop, and I was trying to figure out what you were doing, carefully unwrapping the package, but you did that because you might have it in for a minute and then take it out. And I do find cough drops around the house sometimes. So you sometimes eat a partial cough drop.
Yeah, I just need a little something to like moisten the mouth.
And I when I have a cough drop, I suck on it.
You're like worse than the owl in the Tootsie Roll Pops.
I can go a few seconds.
1, 2, crunch.
Yeah.
That's why I don't. That's one reason I don't like rewrap my cough drops. Maybe I should. Like you could get a partially used cough drop.
So if you're a listener who listens to this podcast and thinks I really relate to Matt and Sheri, maybe you can run that through the filter of, can you make a cough drop last for several days, or are you unable to suck one down to the end without chewing through it?
Well, okay, so I know we talk about your cheapness, but this is my inside baseball. Cheapness. Isn't that what you said at the beginning?
I think so.
Yeah. Halls does make mini cough drops, but they're like twice the amount.
Of course they are.
Yeah. Just like those like smaller sodas. They're the best size.
Yeah.
But they're so much more expensive.
Right.
So that's why I'm like, do you want to share a soda with me? To the boys. Notice how I said soda and not like calling it just a brand name.
When we owned the bakery, I refused to do that, to do half-sized loaves. Because we would have had to charge a lot more for them. It would have been like charging for 2 or 3/4 of a loaf and selling a half loaf. And I didn't like the feel of that. And I was such a jerk though. I'd be like, well, why don't you go find a friend and come back? And then the two of you can each buy or you can buy one full loaf and cut it in half.
Well, I would highly recommend, instead of being a jackass, I would say, it freezes really well. I'll give you 2 bags to double bag it and a label and a twist tie.
If only you had dealt with all the customers and kept me off the front counter.
I probably would have sold half loaves too, since we made sandwiches.
You're just a better human than me. I'm a cough drop crunching jackass who likes it hot because I'm just getting ready for my afterlife.
Well, you're just kind of wasteful of cough drops. You also have to take 2 sticks of gum, which annoy me.
Yeah, like one stick of gum. Like, who does that?
Mike and I were talking about this, a friend of ours. He takes 2 pieces of gum.
There you go.
And I said, is that a guy thing? Like, I don't know of anybody, except for 2 men now, that take 2 pieces of gum.
All right, well, if you've been thinking about emailing us because you had a serious question about relationship recovery from alcoholism, but you've just not been able to get over the hump of the nervousness of communicating with somebody about that, maybe just send us an email about whether or not you take 2 sticks of gum when it's time to chew some gum. That'd be a great way to break the ice. Sheri, we're back here in our home base in hot but dry, sunny Denver, Colorado, bringing our listeners a discussion based on all that we've learned from 516 case studies and counting. That is a lot of stories of heartbreak and redemption, Sheri, don't you think?
Yeah, it is. Sadly.
Let's start today with a story of our own. Why don't you tell our listeners about the first time you really saw my stubbornness in full-fledged living color? Me packing the U-Haul with your sister to move you out of your hometown in Indiana when we moved out after college.
Oh, you think that's the first time I saw your stubbornness?
Okay, well, you can tell a different story if you want.
This is a good one, I guess. Okay. I mean, I probably don't. I think that I don't remember it as well because my uncle was also involved.
I don't remember that.
Yes, my Uncle Kenny, the the grandiose curmudgeon of my family,
Well,
was also involved at some point.
All I know is I didn't want to drive over your Uncle Kenny with the U-Haul by the
Yes.
end of it, and I did very much want to drive over your sister.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, both of you thought you knew best, but
And
I
only one of
remember-
us was right.
and only one of you were right. I think you were both wrong. I would have not packed them the way both of you did. I think she was wanting to like put things in a neat order and have things be laying flat and sort of like Jenga, but
Right.
better.
Okay.
You know? You just wanted to bungee cord the shit out of everything and shove it in, and why do we need to put things in boxes? Why can't we just leave all the silverware just to roll around in the back of the U-Haul? Maybe I'm being exaggerative. I don't quite remember. I just know that I was in tears and very nervous, and I was hiding inside while I heard lots of tension, and then each of you would take breaks coming in. He's an asshole. God, she's so stubborn. My sister was saying you were an asshole. At least you were just saying she's stubborn. You weren't saying, you know, like she's a bitch or anything, because you were just, what you observed was her stubbornness of organization, and
I think
she was observing your stubbornness of disorganization.
I think it was more
chaos.
calculated than that. I definitely thought she was a bitch in the moment.
But you were being nice.
Yeah, she was your sister, and we were getting ready to roll on up out of there. So
Yeah.
I didn't see making you mad at me for calling your sister a name
Yeah.
to be of any value.
Yeah, and
She
then,
doesn't have that particular filter and didn't have
Yeah.
a problem calling me an asshole.
Yeah. Well, I just remember what it was like unpacking it too when we got to our.
It was easy, right? Because everything was loose and
It
free.
just fucking fell out of the back of the truck. We had to make like 82,000 trips because it was like nothing was in boxes.
Here, Sheri,
It
carry
was
this
organized.
spoon.
Here's a wooden spoon and a bowl. You know? Oh, and then drape this blanket over you. Like, it was ridiculous. So then we finally, I think we ended up having to extend our time of rental because
Oh, good. There was some expense involved.
there was expense involved because we had to turn it in at a certain time. And, yeah.
Well,
But that was quite the trip.
at
The
least
car broke down on the way.
At least I proved my stubbornness to you, which was my ultimate goal for the packing experience. And I didn't know until just now, as you're telling this story on this recording, whose side you took, but it sure seems like you liked her packing method better than mine. It's good to know.
Also remember in the moment, I had already lived with my sister and knew her for, 23 years at that point. So she did have a little bit more like clout,
Credibility,
I guess,
yeah.
and credibility, and yeah. And she and I were very similar in working the same, and you were just this chaotic mess of we'll just throw some bungee cords. I think like even the couch was like one of the last things behind.
When you say that you grew up working, you were very much the same. You did grow up in a family environment of mutual help. You've told me that many times. I grew up learning to be self-sufficient. So, that's like trying to mix oil and water to an extent. I was not ever good at asking for help, and that was something that you never saw as a weakness. You thought of it as the thing you did. That's why you had family. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Describe the observations you made in our early life together.
I mean, just like, here's a small example. Like pretty much everybody had a garden in our family. Each of our family members that had a house and property. So like I remember my great grandmother and my grandmother and my mother, and like we all like would take turns going around and working at the gardens together because ultimately it was my grandmother and my great grandmother. Like we froze and canned a lot of the vegetables and some fruit that we had. So it was a communal effort, and it wasn't just stored in their pantries just for them, or a cellar. For my grandmother's house was a cellar.
Right.
But it was like for the family, for the larger extended family. It was for my aunt who didn't have a garden space. It was for my uncle who didn't have a garden space, So that like was very much a community effort. Like if my grandparents needed help with yard work or whatever, we all kind of took turns and went and did things. Like it was never a situation where you did your own housework that sort of day to day, but when it was a big event or a big project like
a barn raising,
like cleaning out my grandpa's garage, like because my grandmother wanted to start after he moved into a nursing home. She wanted to put her car in one of the garage spots. So we all like went and cleaned out one side of the garage and, had an electric door, so she had a remote installed and we all kind of like worked on dismantling the old door. So then we would have then the company come and put that up. So that was never anything that was viewed as like oh, you can't handle your
like
own
weakness.
shit. Like, yeah. Like, because it was just a much more communal sort of situation. And I also saw that with like neighbors at one of the houses that I grew up in when it was just my mom and my sister and I. There was sort of a community garden plot. And my mom would sometimes see that somebody's garden was getting a little too, their edge of the garden was getting a little too weedy or knew they were on vacation. And so she would like take care of that and weed that spot and harvest the fruit or vegetable that they were growing. And if it wasn't going to go bad by the time they got home, she would give it to them. So just in general, I think I was raised more, I'm not saying communal as in hippie, but,
So not a barn
community-based.
raising, but a barn raising is not a terrible visual
Right.
for how you and your family and your close community took care of each other.
Yeah.
So how does that differ from what you saw in me when we first got together and how you think about how I was raised?
I think that you thought it was odd that when we were packing up the U-Haul, like the rest of the story goes that my sister, my mom, and my two nephews, my sister's sons, that were in maybe middle school, late elementary school,
Mm-hmm.
we all caravanned up there.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, it was like a big adventure. They wanted to help unpack. They wanted to see the new city that we were going to live in, those sort of things. So that even moving was a communal effort.
Yes.
Moving was
Who joined me from my side of the family on the big move?
No one, and you didn't want anyone. That's how you were raised. Like my parents moved all their shit themselves, so why do I need their help?
Right.
So that was a little bit of a kind of a quote unquote conversation where like early on in our relationship I realized like family doing things like that was not something you were used to or felt comfortable with, and you didn't understand why I wanted them to come and help move.
Yeah.
So watching you.
So watching me put up a barn by myself, was that fun?
Like, but that's how you were raised. You guys didn't have family around you. Your parents like moved away from their families, their parents, and so you weren't raised by your grandparents or near your grandparents. I shouldn't say raised by, but you weren't raised near your grandparents, and probably even when you went to visit them, you maybe didn't remember like things that your mom or dad did at their parents' house to help them out as they aged. And maybe they didn't at all. Maybe they didn't ask that.
It's funny when you describe the moving posse, and I just think about the packing of the U-Haul aspect or the unpacking part. Like even now, even though I think somewhat better about all of this kind of stuff, when you listed the people that were there, I swear to you, what popped into my mind was if I could have my druthers, even right now today, I would just take the two middle school boys to help me carry shit, because middle school boys pretty much don't have valid opinions about packing, and that's all I would have wanted.
Yeah.
They would have been able to lift the other side of the couch, and boom, that's all I need. Pretty, I don't know. I use the word pathetic.
They would have made no comment about your packing style?
If they wouldn't have made one that was like, yeah, whatever, just carry the other end of the couch, which I can't say to your uncle, whatever, just carry it, like I can't,
Yeah, there was an argument loading
like
it.
I would not have had to have said that to you.
There was an argument loading up a recliner with my uncle that kind of made him pissed off and leave.
Who was arguing? Me and him?
Yeah.
No.
Kind of like, I think it goes this way. I think it should go that way. No, we're going to do it this way. Both of you were really stubborn.
Huh.
Or thought you were right.
Yeah, but I thought I was I got some pretty good respect your
I was
elders.
going to say, I think you were very respectful. You just didn't agree, and I think you ended up letting him like win it, and then when he left, you moved.
Yeah. Oh, well, that definitely sounds like something I would do. So these two diverging attitudes, they extended to our attitudes related to other things besides packing a U-Haul or raising a barn. They extended to things like mental health and relationship distress. And so Think about in our relationship, you can go back as far as you want, but certainly the period when I was in active addiction or in early sobriety. Explain our different views on things like therapy and other supports, not only for me, but for you. Like, what did I think about that and how did it affect you?
You were not a fan of quote unquote airing our dirty laundry. You didn't want me to complain or lament to any of my friends or family about what was going on. Um, just kind of going back to this U-Haul incident, when we had taken and returned the U-Haul,
Is this going to become
we
like
got
a
into
new
an
bucket?
argument.
Is this the new bucket topic?
No, this is just gonna be one podcast.
Okay, sorry.
But there was an argument at leaving the U-Haul thing.
Okay.
And I was in tears crying because I was emotional about moving that far away from my family, and then all the arguing that ensued, and the whole ickiness of it all. And then you were pissed about more money that we had to be spent on the return of it, and I was like, what am I getting myself into? And it was pretty apparent when we returned to the apartment that we were moving into and my family was there that there had been some tension. And my mom asked, like, both of us, is everything okay? And they were like, what's going on? And you're like, no, it's fine. It was just a little misunderstanding, and swept it under the rug.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you didn't dare want to admit, like, I was maybe acting like a bit of an asshole, Doris, and your daughter's upset, you know, emotional about moving so far away. And so right then I went, oh, well, you know, I won't have them to lean on. And I'm not saying that you run to your parents or your sister or brother or your best friend, like, every time you have one little argument. But it definitely kind of set the tone that what's going on in our relationship stays between us and it doesn't go outside of the relationship. After a while, when we were realizing, like, all these differences in our upbringing, and there were, like, I wouldn't necessarily say red flags, but maybe orange flags. Like, there was a communication issue, and like, just we saw the world so differently. Like, when it came to things like, you know, family connection and maybe goals. Because this was the time that you were like, I'm gonna work hard and sleep when I'm dead or whatever. I'll get all the sleep when I'm dead sort of, like, stupid idea. Like, there was, you know, you just were nose to the grindstone in your new job. And so I had mentioned something about maybe I feel like I need to see a counselor or a therapist or something, because I was, and like, told me, like, you thought it was ridiculous, you didn't believe in therapy, your sister had therapy and it didn't work, and all this other bullshit. And then fast forward, like, 15 years later, I had asked again about, like, do you think that you would be upset if I went to see a therapist? And because this was when drinking was pretty bad and I had a lot of anxiety and a lot of tension and tightness in my chest and shoulders and back, and I knew I was carrying a lot of stress. You were pretty grumpy about it, and begrudgingly you were like, fine, if that's what you feel like you need to do. I remembered I messed up the calendar and put it on the wrong date, and you were like, well, I think it's a sign that you don't need therapy.
Yeah.
And
I think I said that's God telling you don't need therapy.
Yeah, probably.
Because the dates were in your calendar different than the date of the appointment.
Yeah. So
that little mistake felt like justification for me.
Right.
Validation.
Right. Not the fact that I am like, I've
now learned that you put most things in your calendar wrong, and it's fine. It's part of it. It's something I've learned to love about you. Okay, that joke didn't land.
Yeah, I don't think I put a whole lot of things wrong in my calendar.
You're great.
Actually, texting and typing, though, that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of deciphering that needs to go on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like consulting a therapist or counselor, or seeking consult from, like, even like our pastor, someone who I felt a connection to, and I felt like he was a really good person and really calm and sound, and you were like, no, because we've had some really great pastors that have been at our churches a really long time since we've been here in Denver. So I felt like, well, if you didn't believe in therapy, what about, religious kind of therapy? No, you weren't into that.
Well, but explain why. Why
you're
would I then know
embarrassed.
about? That's right.
You wouldn't want anybody to know what was going on and what was part of the problem. I mean, even let's just say that you maybe just had your normal, like you were quote unquote a normal drinker. But if it bothered me, that could be misconstrued as you were an alcoholic and you wouldn't want anybody to rush to judgment. And you didn't care what I
think that's so interesting because there are professions out there where the whole kind of focal point, the centering of that profession is to be non-judgmental and help people with the challenges of the emotions and the stresses and the relationship discord of life. And our minister's job is to have a wham banger of a sermon on Sunday and to counsel people.
Yeah.
And so the idea that I would be embarrassed about you going to someone who it's kind of their whole job, it's really embarrassing to me to look back on. I think the thing that separated the therapist that you did go to from everybody else on this list is I wasn't going to know that therapist.
Yeah.
And I still was super reluctant and hated the idea and thought it was a waste of money. And if you want to talk out loud about your problems, just do that in the mirror or things like that.
Yeah, you wanted me to talk to you about our issues. And I was like, but you don't understand. You're not being unbiased and I'm judgmental. And like there was a defense mechanism, right? You couldn't sit and listen to me complain about you and the drinking and how I felt misunderstood and underappreciated and undervalued. And then I felt like you made alcohol a priority over me and the kids because you're like, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was no rationalizing with a person who, and like we've kind of said, you can't like be the aggressor and then turn to your victim for comfort. But in the same sense, you can't be the quote unquote victim and turn to the,
your bad guy, your criminal.
Yeah.
For comfort. Yeah.
So
I hadn't actually thought about that in the context of this discussion. So I'm really glad that you brought that in because the degree to which I was adamant that we are married, we have this sacred vow before God. We are as tight as you're supposed to be with any other human. If you can't tell your problems to me, then something is terribly wrong. Mm-hmm. Even when I was the source of your problems. I mean, I just felt so firm in that. Talk about stubborn. I mean, like, man, I don't care what your thing is. If you can't tell your spouse, then you shouldn't have gotten married.
Right.
Because that is a sign, almost a sign of betrayal, if you feel you need to go tell a mental health professional who does this for a living.
Right.
That's such backward thinking, but I think it's pretty common.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some nodding heads from people as they're listening to this conversation that they have a partner that says either because of cheapness or embarrassment or whatever, no, don't go hire a mental health professional. Mm-hmm. Just talk to me. If you can't talk to me, then you're the one that's fucked up.
Right. Also, like, I would try to talk to you about things. Like, I know when we had our first child, I felt like I had experience with my sister's kids as they were being born. I was 13 when my first nephew was born, and I was around them as infants and babies and toddlers and elementary up until like late elementary, middle school, and when we moved away. So I felt like I had a lot of experience there, and I thought I wanted to do early childhood. So when I first went off to college, so in high school, I did a bunch of like child development classes outside of the high school and worked at daycare and a bunch of stuff like that. So, but I still read a lot. And you were just like, it's all going to be natural. We're just going to wing it.
Right.
So you didn't really want me to kind of seek consultation, like when I would bring this list of things, questions to the doctors. You're like, she's fine.
Yeah.
Or I talked to my parents about it, like our parents, all three of them. And you just felt like it was ridiculous that I was getting their advice on things and you wanted to do things your way. But then it would come time when they started
Well,
to
in
become...
fairness, I wanted to do things my way and your way. I didn't think you didn't have the answers. I thought you had the answers and I had the answers, and combined we had the answers, and we didn't need to like, I wasn't just such a, I don't know, chauvinist that I didn't think the mom had her own solutions.
Yeah.
I just thought they should be instinctual and you shouldn't have to read about them or ask for anyone else's opinion. I definitely still didn't want anyone else's opinion.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to get myself off the hook for that. But I didn't think I was the only one with parenting answers.
But there's always a but when you're dealing with an ass. When they started misbehaving and we had more kids and there were issues, I would come to you and I would just like want to vent or say, oh my gosh, it was a really hard day today. Such and such was stubborn about the clothes they were going to put on for school, or, and there came, just do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
No choices. The big hammer, like, just do it this way. Don't lean into your instincts. And so I felt like that was like one of those times I did want to talk to you about like problems I was having and commiserate with you, also to seek a little bit, I would say, of guidance or just, validation. Like, yeah, kids can be rough. No, you're like, why do you give them a choice between grilled cheese and peanut butter and jelly? Just make one and say, that's what you have to eat. Why are you negotiating things? Why are you giving options? Why are you not just pulling them along and telling them to get in the car and barking orders at them? And they never behave like this for me. I don't know why they do for you. And I'm like, well,
They were afraid of me.
They were afraid of you.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
so
that's very interesting.
So coming to you with those problems, I learned that I can't come to you with the problems because you're just going to tell me what to do.
I used to have a boss early in my sales career that would say to all of his sales reps, there were, I don't know, 8 or a dozen of us or something, he would say, I think it's great that you guys get together and you talk about me behind my back. Just do it when I'm out of earshot because I'm too fragile to hear the criticism. And so I support you doing it, I just don't want to hear it. And I think about him all the time. I think about that statement all the time because he didn't otherwise come across as particularly empathetic or strong in the area of mental health, concerns. But that's a really important point, and I wish that I had applied it to my personal life and understood that you can't always just talk to me, especially when you're talking about me, because, to quote a famous movie line, you can't handle the truth, Matt. And that's just the facts. I mean, I feel like I'm better about it now, but there's still times where you're better off. Even now that we have a much healthier relationship and things are just, infinitely better in every possible imaginable way, you still got some criticisms of me, and some of them you bring to me, and some of them you just want to go tell somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's better. And back then I just didn't understand that concept. If you have to leave the sanctity of the marriage to talk about something within the marriage, you are blasphemous.
Yeah.
Was this all very isolating feeling?
Yeah. My world got smaller. I mean, it wasn't just the alcoholism. I wasn't able to I would feel like, how much do I divulge? Like, what do I say? And then when I hear other women say at my mom's group, and I hear them going, oh, my husband, he was such an asshole last night. But then, I would see them together as a couple and they would be fine. And there was, I'm like, so that's just a normal thing, right? Like, sometimes you're just married to a butthead and he's a butthead that day, and then you move on and you're fine. You just have to air it out. But I felt like, God, I can't say anything because what if it gets back to him? Or, like I said, it wasn't just the alcohol, but did feel very closed off and felt like I had to know everything. And then I started to take on this, because, owning the bakery, that was very hard. And then you didn't like it when the kids were born and the grandparents wanted to come, and you're like, they can come and visit, but I don't need them to do things. And that was really hard. That was 4 times, and 3 grandparent visits, that you were kind of an asshole about, you know, you didn't want them to like make dinner. And I'm like, oh my God, I just had a baby. I just had a baby and we have a toddler. I just had a baby and we have, you know, a preschooler and a toddler. Like, and then just all of that kept growing. And so when our fourth one was born, your mom wanted to come for 2 weeks and you were so like, we don't need her help. And I'm like, yes, we do. We had 4 locations of our bakery. We had 4 children now. You know, like that's a lot. I do need help. And you were so upset that I even like signed up. I gave my address and email and cell phone number and home phone number at our church for a meal train for people to bring meals over. And you were just so annoyed with that. Even just a meal from someone from our church. Now I regularly like push people into accepting meal trains because that's just a communal thing that I grew up with.
One of the things that I never appreciated back then was how much it helped the person providing to use this example of the meal train, how good it feels to the person providing the meal to be helping out.
Mm-hmm.
So not only is it not a sign of weakness to be on the receiving end, but you're really giving someone else the opportunity
to give,
to care
and feel good,
to
and
give
nurture someone else. Like if the very least thing that you could do to help out is to bring a meal and make it like all disposable, you know, like
so they don't have to do dishes.
They don't have to do dishes. Like you're like, that is just ideal. I mean, we have joked in our Echoes of Recovery group about when things are really, really bad at the house and, you know, somebody just goes off to rehab and stuff. We need a meal train for that. Like announce that. Like this person that is the partner at home is now the single parent at home, perhaps. You know, or when things are bad, you just need a casserole, damn it. Like, that's just, you know, but that's just one of those things that I never really understood, like, why you didn't see the communal piece of giving and sharing, giving and taking. Because you would want us to provide meal trains.
For sure.
You know, I remember
I was very comfortable being the giver, just never comfortable being the receiver.
At all, ever.
Yeah. Okay, so something changed though. I went from being stubbornly against any mental health interventions, any support and help, to being stubbornly in support of therapy and group work and writing and vulnerable dialogue and friendships that are, you know, mutually giving and support among families. I'm a big fan of barn raising now. Why did I change? What's your perspective on, because I mean, I want you to talk about this because I don't want this just to sound like me, I don't know, boasting or claiming something that isn't true. But to my vision of this is an absolute 180-degree change. I went from thinking there's no place in our society for this to really thinking it's kind of top of the list of importance.
Do you want me to tell you when I think it all changed?
Yeah, like
I think it all changed, and that perspective changed in you when you had when you wrote your coming out letter and you had your first person to reach out and contact you and say like what was going on in their life and being so vulnerable. I think that was the start of the change, and you just were rewarded with like kindness and thankfulness and appreciativeness. And you saw people reaching out to me, and you saw people at our church like saying, gosh, that must have been so tough for you too. We didn't know this was going on and blah, you know. And I think that's when you really felt embraced by the community and you were developing a new relationships, and you could see how validating it was and how good it felt to be embraced for something that you felt was, you know, a really like a weakness, or, you know, I know that you knew by then in your sobriety that it wasn't a weakness, that it's an addiction, it's a disease, but you weren't being shunned. And that's when I felt like it started to change for you, because I mean, you had mentioned earlier about the therapist that you were never going to meet. It was during COVID, and that spring when I finally of 2020, when I was like, okay, I really need to get a therapist now. And you had been sober for a little while and things weren't getting better. And I was like, you know, like inside myself, didn't understand what was going on. We didn't understand that the partners needed support too. So I did BetterHelp. So I think that those two things were big pivotal events, and you could see me share and have a therapy appointment, and then you didn't say, I want you to tell me about this. You said, share any of it with me that you would like. But then I got the words, and I got, because I'm a verbal processor, so I was able to ramble out and ramble on with someone who could get me to say it in a concise way and understand what I was feeling, because I didn't even understand some of the feelings I was feeling, because I didn't know how to express that, because I had been shut down, except for anger was the only feeling I felt like I had at the end. So I think those were two very pivotal things. You saw what it did for me in therapy. Things weren't immediately right away better than ever, but you saw that I was able to communicate with you, and you saw it was helping me, and when you were receiving that good feedback from people about after your coming out letter, and the more people you shared with.
Yeah. I think that first one probably the most so. I didn't actually, in preparing for this discussion today, Sheri, I didn't realize that. Like, I'm sitting here processing it while you're telling me, and I think you're probably right. One of the pieces that I wrote back then for our blog on our Sober and Unashamed website, I don't remember what the title is. I'll find it and link it in the show notes. It was something to the effect of the first 5 people that I told about my alcoholism, and what happened in each of those 5 conversations was, like, while I was, and I had this like prepared talk to explain it to them. I remember one of them, when I was waiting for them, they were meeting us at our house, and when I was waiting for that person to come over, I realized I needed to go put on more deodorant because I had that stress sweat going. I was so worried about this conversation. So I would prepare exactly what I was going to say, and I was just ready for like a backlash of, oh, I knew you were a degenerate. I knew you were a morally failed and corrupted person. Like, I don't know what I thought these people that were very close to us.
I was going to say, these were your friends.
I don't know what I expected, but that is what I was prepared for. But the point is, each of these 5 people individually, as I was telling them the story, they looked like they couldn't wait for me to fucking shut up.
That's how most of us are.
And I was going to say, that's a look I'm familiar with because I see it on your face a lot. They couldn't wait for me to shut up because they wanted to tell me their story of how alcoholism had impacted their lives.
Yeah.
Not all because of their own drinking, but because of the drinking of a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shocked that these people were trusting me with these private stories. I was like, where is this coming from? And you're right, it was not short of life-changing for me to have that vulnerability be rewarded with closeness and connection that I mean, if you're isolated and shut off from people and you don't ask for help and you don't accept help, one of the negative side effects of that is it's really hard to get close to people, because if you're not a giver and a receiver, if you're only a giver, then that other person doesn't feel like there's a mutual benefit to the relationship. Mm-hmm. And so why would they want to get close to you? Mm-hmm. I think most, maybe all of the relationships I had at that time lacked a mutual benefit, and the people...
Because you were always the doer, and I'm going to take care of it all, and I don't need anything from you, and there is no feeling of give and take, and that it's...
I remember when our neighbor down the road, and this has been many number of years ago now, maybe 10, so I don't know where this fits in with sobriety or recovery or early sobriety. It doesn't matter. I remember she is, a couple decades older than you and I, and she lives alone, and she needs help sometimes, trimming a dead tree branch or taking a trash barrel out to the curb or whatever. And she would ask for our help, and we would do it, and she was always trying to pay the kids, and I would say, oh, please don't pay the kids. I'm trying to teach them the value of being neighborly. And she stopped me once and she said, you know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to feel like an equal in this relationship. So you're going to have to give a little. And I was like, whoa, that's really impactful. It never occurred to me how she might be feeling about needing our help. It only occurred to me that I was Father of the Year for teaching my kids to help without expectation of anything in return.
Mm-hmm.
That was an important lesson too.
Yeah. I think both are equally important, but I do remember you coming down and saying, oh my goodness, like, you know, I just heard this from our neighbor. We won't say her name. And I was like, yeah, I mean, sometimes it is nice to ask for help, get the help, but then want to give gratitude and thanks for that help, whether it be in the form of, you know, extra food from her garden or the canned peach, you know, peaches that she had done, or, you know, gift certificates to the local ice cream shop to give to the kids for doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there is a give and take that's in every relationship.
Yeah.
That's very much needed.
That's right.
Because I think that
now whenever I go down to help her out with something, I bring an
what do you
invoice
got
for
first?
$50 just for the consultation.
What do you got to offer me before I do the work? But I mean, it even broke down into our relationship where I felt very inadequate because you would always want to do things for me, like do this, do that, you know, like even to the point of like, you know, taking out the trash and the recycling. It's not like I can't do it, but you just like to do it. So it's all these things that you like to do, like mowing the yard. And I'm like, why do you think we had 4 kids? They should be mowing the yard, like for yourself some time. But in a way, if that's just a constant, like you doing everything, it kind of made me feel a little bit inadequate in the relationship.
All right, we set the stage. If you are like Sheri, if you're in a relationship with someone who has traditionally been against asking for or even accepting help, or if you're like me, if you're someone who believes there is some stoic greatness in having, you know, radical independence and self-sufficiency, then I hope that you'll stay tuned and listen to the rest of the conversation after our support break, because we're going to talk about the tangible benefits that come from learning to be open to supports from community, supports from friends and family, and supports from mental health professionals, because it's a big deal, and it was a lesson that I took decades to learn, and hopefully maybe there's some people that can learn from our experience. Sheri, we are supported by SoberLink, the high-tech, tamper-proof, stellar quality, best-in-class breathalyzer and accountability tool.
So Matt, we talk about what SoberLink is every week. But in your opinion, who is SoberLink for?
SoberLink is for people like you and me. People who are trying to rebuild trust in a relationship wrecked by alcoholism. It's easy to say, I'm sober now. What more do you want from me? I'm pretty sure you heard those words.
Oh yeah, I've heard them and I've hated them every time you said them.
That's exactly my point. Words don't rebuild trust. Repeated positive behavior does. I wish I had used SoberLink to help me prove I was serious and to restore your trust in me sooner. SoberLink is also for people in relationships that have dissolved, leaving them in co-parenting situations. SoberLink is accountability and it is peace of mind. When it comes to the safety of our children, nothing is more important than peace of mind.
But what if a listener is in a relationship in recovery or a co-parenting situation and they just don't know? They aren't ready to commit to SoberLink? What do you say to those people?
I say take the very first, very small step. Request a promo code. Learn just a little bit about this tool and this company on a mission to help restore trust and accountability. It doesn't cost a thing to request a promo code.
So I know a lot of people in situations like ours who consult with an attorney about divorce, and they take that first step, learn their rights, start to understand the whole process. And the vast majority of people who do consult a lawyer don't always file for divorce. So taking these first steps initiates an action and change and educates you.
That's right. And that's all we're asking people to do. Request a promo code for $50 off your SoberLink device. Take that first step. It is easy and there is no commitment, and you can learn more about this awesome product and company. For a promo code for $50 off your device, please go to soberlink.com/untoxicated. We are supported by Echoes of Recovery. We're offering listeners a 30-minute video call with you and me, Sheri. If you're the loved one of an alcoholic, this offer is for you. This is a free offer, I should mention. This is not therapy, it is peer support. It is a chance for you to share what you're going through with people who truly understand.
So, we have learned that friends and family love us, and they mean well, but sometimes they just don't always get it. And their advice is often motivated by getting us out of a bad situation. So, without nuance or compassion for the whole complexity of the relationship and the alcohol. And Matt and I understand this complexity because we've lived it.
Therapy is great, but it is expensive. Al Anon has helped so many, but it's just not the right fit for everyone.
So, we're ready to listen and share what we've learned through our experiences and through hearing the stories of so many, like 516 case studies and counting.
In your 30-minute free video call with us, we will listen with empathy and share some details about our Echoes of Recovery full group program of the loved ones of alcoholics who get what you are going through.
One of the questions is your name, so 4 really.
Yeah, 4 questions. We kind of reversed these.
Oh.
One of the questions of the 4 questions, or the 5 questions that you have to answer. Okay, if you're watching the video, then we can't fix this because I don't know how to edit video. But for people that are listening to the audio, we're going to fix it. So hang in there, video people. To sign up for your free 30-minute video call with Sheri and me, please go to echoesofrecovery.org and answer just 5 simple questions.
So one of the questions is your name, so 4 really.
Good point. It shouldn't take you a minute to take advantage of this offer and sign up for a free 30-minute video call. Please go to echoesofrecovery.org. Okay, Sheri, you talked a little bit about this, but let's go back and talk a little bit more about your experience with therapy. You had the experience when I was still actively drinking, but then you sought therapy again a couple of 2-3 years into my recovery. What did therapy do for you?
Well, I learned a lot, right? That's what therapy does. You learn a lot. Well, I'll just say, I really got a great match. My therapist had experience.
Which time are you talking about?
So way back in the day.
Okay.
I never ended up going to the therapist because you honestly kind of made me feel like such an asshole about it. And I just didn't need to go to a therapist and I could just take the anti-anxiety. So I wish I would have pursued the therapy back then along with taking the anti-anxiety meds.
So when you went, when I was 2 or 3 years into recovery, right?
So it was in the spring of 2020. So what is that, 2 years?
Yeah, a little over 2 years.
Yeah. So that was virtual. I got paired with a therapist who had experience.
A little over 3 years. Sorry, I was just doing some math. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's not important. 2 years, 3 years, whatever. You got paired with a therapist that had
a lot of experience with addiction from both sides, actually.
Okay.
They had been an addict, and their partner was an addict, and they got sober, and their partner did not.
Oh, so they had been both.
So they had been the partner
and the loved one
of an addict before. So yes,
the person and the loved one,
the addict and the loved one.
Wow.
So I thought that was really great because I could have both sides. So I felt like I could understand and they could understand and explain to me what I was missing. Because if you're not an addict and you don't have addictions and things, it's really hard to understand. Well, why don't you just stop? Why don't you just not do it? You don't know what's all behind it. So I got that support, which was greatly needed. But then I also learned that there were things, from my childhood experiences. We carry everything in from our childhood into the relationship. So I learned a lot about generational trauma. We talked a lot about my father's alcoholism and the divorce. And So I really could figure out like where some of my actions and behaviors and anger were coming from. Um, so I think that helped a lot. And then a lot of tools, a lot of resources. And along the same time frame, we developed Echoes of Recovery. And in that group, I learned so much because people that had joined our group had been dealing with this for a little while as well, and they were able to look a lot of resources up and things like that. You had in your notes that you wanted to talk about like computer searches and things. I was terrified to do any sort of search online because I was worried that you would find it in the history. That I was like, what if my husband is an alcoholic? Why is my husband always a drunk asshole? Like, because those are things you Google and you find resources. But I was very, very worried about doing that because I didn't want to start an argument. I didn't want you to think I was, turning to someone else. I mean, I remember I borrowed some library books, but I went to one that wasn't even in our neighborhood where I didn't know anybody to put them when I put them on reserve. And I put them far away so it wouldn't be like one of our local librarians that, because you often took the kids to the library too, so it wouldn't be like, oh, your wife checked out this book cause
Yeah.
So it was to that point. Not that I was feeling physically intimidated and abused, but emotionally, and I knew that would really upset you. So
I love that you talked about what you get out of Echoes of Recovery. Sometimes I'm worried that when people hear us talk or they hear us read the ad read for Echoes, they picture us like those two people that led the Heaven's Gate cult. Like we're sitting there making like videos.
Ben and men or something. It was like that.
Doe and a deer or something.
Yeah.
A female deer. Or Doe and Ray or something.
I don't know, but it was,
whatever.
Non-binary names.
But I picture them, I picture people thinking that Echoes of Recovery is us like sitting up there preaching about what the future can look like.
White and red.
And nothing could be further from the truth. We're sitting there listening to other people talking about,
taking notes and writing down like new books and resources. Yeah. Like just very quickly, the writing prompts we had recently, we talked about green flags. And my writing is about how sometimes I kind of forget that I have this wealth of resource at my fingertips. Literally, I could even like email one of these people and say, what is that book you were talking about? Or what is your latest and greatest like resource, that you found? Like, what's a great podcast on this subject? And I've got 180 people that can tell me.
Yeah, and I've noticed that if somebody doesn't give you the answer you want, you tell them that they're not going to be allowed on the spaceship when it comes.
That is not the truth.
You're very good at getting what you want. My therapy experience, my takeaway, first of all, my takeaway from your experience, I think it was valuable. Because when you started talking about the fact that the therapist wasn't just honing in 100% on what an asshole I was. Now, there was a lot of time spent on what an asshole I was, but there was also time spent on your childhood environment and lessons you learned from some relationship distress that you witnessed in your family of origin. When I learned that, I just felt like all of the weight of the shame and the pressure and the blame wasn't all on me. I felt like your therapist, it made me grow confident in your therapist because I'm like, okay, this is someone who isn't out here to, hang pelts on the wall. They're out here to help my wife get healthy, and they're turning over all the rocks. And so that was really rewarding to me to hear your experience with your therapy. My takeaways from therapy, one, Jason Polk, the gentleman with whom we originally started this podcast and did the first 8 episodes, he told me, and I've said this so many times, but that the only reason humans make significant change in their life is because the pain of the status quo is more than the pain of change. Mm-hmm. People are naturally reluctant to change, especially with big things. And so the pain of the status quo has to rise to be so great. And that's where this theory of the pain concoction that I talk about all the time emanated from. As a drinker, amount of pain I was in from depression, anxiety, and your detachment had to grow to tip the scale to that pain being more than the work I was going to have to do in recovery. And so that was, without therapy, without a therapist, I never would have known that. Another therapy experience, you and I have a complicated relationship with our daughter. I specifically, our daughter, who was our oldest, and it was more consciously exposed to my alcoholism than our younger kids who maybe didn't know what was going on all the time. She has her own recovery battles, and we reached a point where she was yelling at me about stuff, and I called my therapist friend Catherine and said, Catherine, what? It's getting worse. She's yelling at me. And Catherine said, no, that's not worse. That's better. That means she trusts you enough to yell at you without worrying about backlash. That's a great sign. And that was just like a mind-blowing moment. That if you aren't open to supports and therapy and connection with people who get it, you'll just never learn that lesson.
Right.
And so that was so important. And then the other thing I want to mention about Catherine, because she was on our podcast, episode 77, March of 21.
Or Catherine Craig.
Catherine Craig, the therapist
Okay.
I'm talking about.
Just trying to clarify.
She was on episode 77, March of 21, and we went over ACEs. She talked about adverse childhood experiences and how those become the underlying issues that many people in addiction end up medicating. And what was so helpful about that conversation was I realized, okay, I was never sexually abused as a child. I was never physically abused as a child. My childhood trauma is an accumulation rather than one, awful moment where I witnessed a murder or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so that's such a valuable lesson because I took the pressure off myself to understand, why is it that I drank? Is it just bad willpower, or am I just a deviant because I don't have this huge childhood trauma moment? No, I don't. But I've got a variety of adverse childhood experiences that just piled up and accumulated and caught up with me. And so therapy has been wonderful in my life as well. And so this 180 that I've done is something that I'm very, very grateful for. I want to talk for a minute about pharmaceuticals. You and I have never been people that kind of lead with, go get on a drug. And there was probably a time, if you dug through all my writing and all the stuff we've said, you could probably find some pretty negative comments about pharmaceuticals. Some of that is just from having family members so reliant on so many prescriptions that were intended to mitigate the side effects of other prescriptions, and just this accumulation thing, that I've always had a fairly negative reaction to the idea of pharmaceuticals. But I've matured in my opinion, and I definitely recognize that there are times when pharmaceuticals are necessary. It's hard to give therapy to someone who's committed suicide. So, for instance, sometimes pharmaceuticals are necessary in kind of an acute, like let's stop the massive spiraling down and try to get things stabilized. Mm-hmm. And then from a point of stabilization, we can start working on the underlying issues.
Yeah, well, that's why I ended up going on the anti-anxiety medication. Mm-hmm. Like going on trips, not vacations, trips. Well, vacations even back then would have been a lot more drinking.
Right.
Trips with family where there was overconsumption from you. So I could take a little, work my way up to taking a higher dose of the anti-anxiety. It helped me stabilize and calm down and not be so anxious and have my nervous system so out of whack where I just fight or flight. I think that you and I talked recently. I don't think I have a freeze or fawn. Fawn maybe a little bit when I was trying to keep the peace, but I was either fight or flight. Mm-hmm. Those were my go-tos. So it allowed me to stay in the moment and kind of maintain some sort of stabilization in my own body, so then I wouldn't be so worked up and high strung when things were happening. Yeah. So, and that was in a time of your life where you didn't like therapy or pharmaceuticals, but I think you maybe don't remember, but there were great side effects. And the side effect was I wasn't just yelling and being so out of control, which then made everybody have tension in the house.
I wouldn't say that's a side effect. I would say that's a direct effect.
Yeah.
That was what the medication was intended for.
Yeah.
And it worked for you. And you're not on it anymore.
No.
And you're not on it because I'm a draconian asshole who made you come off of it. You have been able to come off of it because you've improved in other areas in your life.
Right. And it gave me a little bit, I mean, I wasn't even on it that long, but it gave me a tool in a way. And that's when I started to like do some reading and recovery work, because you and I had started being more open about your alcoholism being a problem, and this was when you were really like calling yourself an alcoholic and really wanting to try, and you weren't sober, but you were doing reading about it and you were doing writing about it. I was doing work, so, and it was before you even got sober. So then I felt like, okay, I have some tools. I also know that I am a victim of secondhand drinking. I understand it's a brain chemistry thing. So I was feeling more confident that I could come off of that, because I use it as a tool to start building up my self-esteem, to talk to you about things. And we were working on it a little bit together. And then I came off of it completely.
That's right.
Yeah.
When you and I talk about things that we do promote for the long term, it's things like food. Food is medicine if the nutrition profile is done properly. Exercise, getting out in nature, meditation and breath work, writing, getting a good amount of sleep. These are all natural interventions that can reduce the dependence on pharmaceuticals. And I want to be clear, this isn't coming from us from the perspective of doctors or psychiatrists, because we're not that. But this is coming from us from the perspective of people with 516 case studies under our belt. And of those 516 case studies, there are many, many, many examples where people use pharmaceuticals on a temporary basis, or they used big doses of pharmaceuticals on a temporary basis and were able to wean down to a smaller dose over time. And, again, we're not against them, but we would, certainly in our own lives and with a lot of people that we've met, we're excited that people are able to get the breathing room they need through a pharmaceutical intervention, and then find a natural way to do the long-term permanent healing. Mm-hmm. And so please don't ever think that this is, Sheri and Matt gave you permission to stop taking your meds because of this paragraph section of this conversation. That's not what we're saying at all. This all has to be done under a doctor's guidance, but there are lots and lots and lots of examples where this is exactly what's happened, just what happened for you. Mm-hmm. Nervous system work, that's another thing that I want to hit on. When you are the partner or the loved one of an alcoholic, in many, many, many cases, you spend a lot of time, if not all of your time, in nervous system activation. And learning to regulate your nervous system and get out of a constant state of fight, flight, fawn, or freeze, that's a hugely important aspect of the kind of work that you should be doing, whether that's with a therapist or in group work or through some of these other interventions, through getting out in nature, through exercising, through reading about it, through writing about it. But being conscious of what nervous system work looks like, I think is really important. And that's not a concept you and I even understood maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. But now it's so interesting. I'm not the loved one. I'm not the one that lived my life in activation for a period like you did. But I can totally feel when I'm going in and out of nervous system activation. And, I don't get chased by bears very often. So it's not just if I'm being chased by a bear, but if I get into some kind of stressful situation or a situation that takes intense concentration, even if it's like recreational, even if it's something I'm enjoying doing, whitewater rafting would be an example. Mm-hmm. Like you're up, man, you're on it. You're on the edge of your seat when you're whitewater rafting, and it's not because you're terrified of something bad that's going to happen. You're exhilarated by something fun that's happening. And so I can feel myself move what I think is healthily in between states.
I mean, again, we are not doctors and psychologists and therapists, but I would say that you did have nervous system deregulation when you were drinking. You just used alcohol to medicate it and numb it out.
Yeah.
I think there were things that made you, unbalanced.
I just didn't have a healthy way to move between states.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, you're probably right.
I mean, I just think about stressors or family interactions where you were feeling, insignificant or dismissed or kind of poked fun at for your choices. Like that is shame and embarrassment from someone calling you out, but it also, I think, affects your nervous system. So I think you were just medicating it.
Yeah. There's lots of media that's available also to help people in a therapeutic way without necessarily having one-on-one contact with somebody. There's just tons of resources out there, videos, articles, books, podcasts. I want you, Sheri, to share with our audience, please, about a video that we both watched as part of our groups, our Echoes of Recovery and Shot Sobriety groups, about a concept called DARVO. And I'm not going to make you remember the acronym because it's the worst ever acronym. I can never remember what each of those letters means. But we learned about DARVO by watching a video, and we were both like, oh, no way. I've lived my whole life doing that. You said that too, not just me.
Right. I don't think I said it like I was a gnarly surfer from California. But
you weren't Cheech and I wasn't Sean?
I don't think they were surfers, they were potheads. But yeah, I wasn't Sean Penn.
Okay.
Well, what is original? But yeah,
what is
I realized,
and what a valuable video lesson we learned.
Exactly. It's like when your partner is telling you about their issues and the things that are going on, and you're supposed to be a good, respectful listener, but you then twist and turn it, and you turn into, well, you do this and you do that, and this is why I act like that. So turning their like openness and vulnerability and victimhood, and you're turning it back on them because you would start to tell me your woes and things that were wrong, that I was doing wrong, and I'd be like, yeah, well, I wouldn't act like that if this. Or you do this. And yeah, I'm very good at DARVO.
Yeah.
Very good.
I think the D in DARVO is deflect. That makes sense. It's either that or dickhead, but
I think it's deflect.
It could be either, really.
I think it's deflect.
Yeah. Yeah. So
and then something reverse and
victim or orgasm. I don't think
orgasm there. Yeah.
Probably not.
Not in that.
But there's lots of ways to get these mental health interventions and to get on a better path and to ask for help. And sometimes you can just use resources readily available, mostly for free. And you don't, there's great entry level ways to ask for help without actually having the risk of actually having to ask a person for help.
And we had someone who does a podcast on emotional abusers. And his name was Paul. I cannot remember his last name. He was on one of our podcasts.
Yes.
His podcast, it was a podcast or a YouTube channel?
No, he came on our podcast.
Yeah, no, but I mean, does he have a YouTube channel?
He has actually 2 different podcasts.
Okay.
Paul Coley.
Yeah, I know it was K.
It's a C.
No?
It's a C.
It's a C.
Yeah, he's great.
Well,
we should have a computer up while we're recording.
I think that we should do that sometime.
Yeah.
I've done that. After this lay on my phone. But I also learned about emotional abuse, and the way he talks about it doesn't make you feel like you're an asshole. And I realized how much of an emotional abuser I had been, unbeknownst to me. I think because I fell in that DARVO category. But Paul also offered a lot of great insight.
He did. And because I think we really want to encourage listeners to go back and listen to that episode. And since I can't think of his last name, I am going to link that in the show notes. Paul, our apologies for not being prepared to talk
his
about
words were very insightful. He has
he's got a radio voice.
Which we just can't remember his last name.
Yeah,
it's not that we're so arrogant we can't.
Cola something.
Yeah.
Great guy. One more intervention I want to talk about, mental health intervention, way that you can start to move forward. I want to talk about writing for a minute. And I know that you might be thinking, oh, this guy's a writer, so of course he likes writing. There is more to this than just the fact that I do it so I love it. There are 2 parts, 2 like separate values that you can get from writing your story, from expressing yourself using the written word. The first one is what I like to call "This Lives Here Now." And that phrase isn't original. That comes from Dusty Shea, who was our guest on episode 116 of the podcast. She's actually been on the podcast several times. But on this one episode, we focused specifically on her situation. I want to give a trigger warning. This was an episode about the suicide of her husband. So very difficult to listen to, but definitely worthy. And she's the person who taught us that when, even I had at this point written hundreds of blog posts. I was a prolific writer at this point, but she explained to me something that was happening for me that I didn't understand was happening for me. And that's this concept of this lives here now. She needed to get the trauma of her husband's death out of her head. So she wrote about it. And once she wrote about it, her brain, a switch flipped, and her brain said, okay, you are no longer responsible for being the sole possessor of this memory. This memory is now written down. So you can release it, you can process it, you can mourn it, you can do whatever you need to do in your brain, and you can let it go to the greatest degree possible because it lives somewhere else. And so this lives here now is such a huge benefit of writing. You don't have to be a good writer. You don't have to ever intend to publish your writing. You can be just a journaler. But by writing down the traumas that you've experienced, you release your brain from its own responsibility of being the owner of the memory. Mm-hmm. It's a big deal. You've experienced it.
Yeah.
Writing has helped you.
Yes, it does. I think it's very cathartic that sometimes you just want to rant and rave and you don't want to share all of those maybe twisted inner thoughts with anyone else,
the sharing is part 2 of what writing can do. Uh-huh. And you're right. Sometimes you write just for yourself, but sometimes you write with the full intention of sharing with our Echoes of Recovery group. What's that? Because the point I want to drive home is writing is 2 separate purposes. The one we talked about, that this lives here now, but there's also a great amount of benefit that you can get from sharing the writing in a safe environment. What's that benefit like for you?
Well, I was going to say sometimes there are things that you don't want to share with other people, but then when you're in a group and you're hearing some of the things that they're saying, you're like, okay, well, I'm not so embarrassed to say this now out loud. This was a thought, or this was just a little twisted, wicked dream of, oh, this is what I'd like to do to my husband when he's drinking too much, So sometimes it is kind of funny and comic relief that you can go there. But then when you hear other people like sharing their vulnerability and their thoughts and then saying, wow, and you're telling them like, that was really great. And then you get that back to you. Like, that was really great, or that was so funny, or so witty, or so deviant. I love it, So I think the compliments kind of, help you feel okay about your quality of writing, because I'm a terrible writer.
You're not a terrible writer.
I just kind of just black it all out there.
But that's what the whole point is.
But the whole point is that, right? So, and another piece that we haven't hit on is sometimes you start to write to a prompt, but then you go elsewhere and you're like, that's not even where the prompt was supposed to lead me. But that's where your brain was going, and that's where your brain needed you to release this part or talk about that part or add that.
That's why you and I are big on calling them writing prompts and not assignments. Can you explain the difference?
Well, assignment is you need to stick to the topic. Prompt is here, free write. Start at an idea, or tell a story about. And maybe your story doesn't line up with what the prompt is, but that's what your brain needs to tell you to write and get out.
That's right.
So for me, a prompt is like listening to your brain and getting your juices flowing. Assignment is hold tight to that subject.
That's right.
And topic.
Absolutely. All of these things, finding therapy that works for you, doing nervous system work like meditation and breath work, getting out in nature, food as medicine, exercise, good sleep, writing, nervous system work, I already said that, finding stuff in media, writing. I already said that, but I like to say it again. All of this stuff, all of it, I like to think back to something that I heard a podcast psychologist say once. I'd love to give attribution, but I never wrote this down. She said, well, I didn't realize it was going to stick with me. So, and now I can't find it. She said the heart, but at least I'm not just flat out taking credit for it. I think most people do.
You might as well at this point. Go ahead.
Okay, well, next time you hear this, it'll be my idea. She says the hardest part about exercise is lacing up your shoes. Do you want to explain to our listeners what that means? Or do you want me to do it?
You can do it. I'm melting.
You're done. She says...
hot in here.
She says the actual exercise is kind of ho-hum, so-so for most people. The feeling you get after exercise is phenomenal. You feel accomplished. You feel like you did something important for yourself. And you've got all the adrenaline flowing and you're motivated to do it again. But lacing up those damn shoes is where most people fall short because they think, ugh, I want to do this, so I don't think I will. And the same holds true with all of these interventions that we've talked about today. Mm-hmm. So if you're like, I don't want to get out in nature today, make yourself. Say, I'm only going to be out there for 2 minutes, but I got to get out there because once you're out there, you'll probably stay and it'll be to great benefit to you and your own mental health and potentially your individual recovery and your relationship recovery as well. Sheri, it's been decades since your sister and I loaded that U-Haul. Your mom might be selling her house, so we might have another chance to load a U-Haul together. What advice do you have for me?
Oh, shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up.
Just shut the fuck up and let her do it.
Some great advice from my loving wife.
Well,
Sheri, the original intent for this episode, I gotta dig up this piece of paper, was for the title to be From Stubborn to Accepting Support. But now I'm thinking the title should just be There's Always a But When You're Dealing with an Ass. Which you said, I'm going to give attribution, you said that 45 minutes ago. I like that a lot. Did you hear that somewhere or is that just you? All right. Well, thanks for listening to episode 305. There's Always a But When You're Dealing with an Ass. Did you hear things today that you relate with? Did this conversation resonate for you? If the answer is yes, then I'm sure there is someone in your orbit who could benefit from this conversation too. One of the very best things you can do for your healing is to become part of someone else's solution. Crush the stigma. Participate in the conversation. Maybe you aren't ready to join one of our groups, but that doesn't mean you can't be involved in a meaningful way. All we are asking is this. Please share this episode with one person. Copy the link and send a text or email. Put it on your social media. Be bold. Claim the sense of belonging you deserve. Just one share. And thank you for listening to the Untoxicated Podcast. You've got this, and we've got you.